Hello and welcome to the Hard Sell, the programme where a stick in the swill-bucket rattles back. Good news everyone, the plague's over. Well, actually no it isn't, we just collectively decided to stop giving a shit, fuck everything. Which is a bit troubling, no question, but then anyone who's lived through the last 5 years can hardly be surprised in anyone, let alone everyone, for deciding to just embrace nihilism. I for one am not going outside any time soon, despite my hair creeping dangerously close to the small of my back. I will go no further than my garden. And by my garden, I mean this pre-built movie storm set. I looked at gardening before, alongside DIY in that case. And I mentioned then how a trip to the garden centre felt like falling into an alternate universe with completely different values. It was like a supermarket from another dimension where everyone was really into seeds. And there were unfamiliar brand names and logos everywhere, equivalent to the ones I was used to, like Heinz and Birdseye and such, only for mulch instead of beans and spades instead of fish fingers. It's a specialised, narrowly focused area, and for that reason not the most common, lucrative or flashy advertising sector. The most expensive advert ever made was for Chanel. It was made by Baz Luhrmann, starred Nicole Kidman in a dress by Karl Lagerfeld, and cost $33 million. It's hard to imagine Kidman stepping out in Lagerfeld for Flymo or Weedol. And among the 978 reasons for that is that Flymo and Weedol couldn't afford her. They couldn't afford Sophie Lee, let alone Nicole Kidman. It's a small industry. It's essentially hobbyism, a niche. Everyone likes to smell nice, but not everyone even has a garden. It's comparable to video games in its way, except that video games are a multi-million-dollar hobby, and rakes aren't. You can advertise a video game at prime time repeatedly and noisily during million viewer slots occupied by soap operas or even live sporting events. Miracle-Gro would have a harder time breaking into this sort of a slot, especially if it wanted to be able to afford any other advertising slots anywhere. So a lot of advertising for garden-related products goes out in the daytime to early evening, where any potential viewer would likely have enough time on their hands to care about rhododendrons. They also tend to have fairly low budgets of their own. In fact, sometimes it seems they can't even afford multiple takes.
Using spades and forks can be back-breaking. The garden claw virtually eliminates bending and lifting. Turn the handle and the steel prongs corkscrew into all soils, even my heavy clay. Cultivating and weeding can be done faster with little effort. Also available, the Garden Claw Gold. The height's adjustable for the taller or shorter gardener. Garden claws are guaranteed for 5 years. Look for the blue and yellow box. Available at Do It All, Focus, Homebase and B&Q.
You used to see this one all the time, provided you were unemployed or otherwise housebound in 1998 and given to watching Channel 4 in the afternoon. I don't know where Peter Surridge is now, but I have a worried feeling that he might spend his days reciting this same copy into a cracked mirror over and over again, desperately trying to deliver it in a way that doesn't sound like there's a man with a shotgun behind the camera, cocked and loaded and ready to fire as soon as he gets it wrong. I mean, there clearly isn't, or he wouldn't have got away with that split-second stumble at bending and lifting.
Virtually eliminates bending and lifting.
The strange thing is that it's still quite an effective advert. Peter Surridge is the exact opposite of a slick advertising pitchman, but that generates a certain amount of not just sympathy, but identification. He's very clearly, inescapably even, just an ordinary chap-type organism. And with his unaffected, untrained voiceover, instead of a bellowing but inherently insincere Billy Mays type, the garden claw actually looks kind of useful, you know? It breaks up clay and everything. It seems quite neat. Without someone violently bigging it up, it has to stand for itself, and honestly, in that respect, it looks like it might be worth looking into. Of course, at that point you discover it comes from the people behind the clapper, the cheer pet, and the VCR co-pilot, so maybe you think twice. But it's an achievement that it got you to think once in the first place. It's not a strategy I'd recommend for every product under the sun, and almost certainly wouldn't work at all if you tried to achieve it deliberately. But in this one case, it actually has a sort of perverse counterintuitive effectiveness.
Look for the blue and yellow box. Available at Do It All, Focus, Homebase and B&Q.
Obviously, though, the garden claw is very much at or near the bottom of the range in advertising terms. It's basically a Dragon's Den invention. That's Shark Tank if you're American. There are actual companies, multinational ones even, that make enough of a profit out of the garden to afford real adverts. Netlon, for example, aren't exactly household names, but they do well enough to afford Graham Ralph at the Richard Williams studio to create this animated fever dream.
Target below. Easy pickings for everyone.
Despite severe losses, the nation's gardeners are fighting back with Netlon. Each Netlon product playing its vital role, protecting strawberries on the ground, supporting the bean and pea lines, aiding climbing plants in the air, bringing peace and prosperity to the home front.
Netlon, for better net results.
Shameless anti-bird propaganda, but then what do you expect? I'm just surprised they don't have comedy German accents. Everything else is prime Blitz nostalgia, a mere 40 years on. Mind you, another 40 years has gone by since then and we still haven't shaken it off. There is a slight problem with using straight-up cartoon animation for this particular subject. The whole point is to make your garden look nice, to create actual beauty with your own stinking hands. Holding it at one remove like this, by representing it solely in animation, slightly blunts the point. Of course, Netlon is largely concerned with the practical, edible side of the practice, but even so, it's much more on-brand to use filmed stop-motion animation, as in this Fison's ad. ICI went through a phase in the early 80s when their garden products were advertised by Robbie Coltrane in a variety of scenarios. Well, at least two, set nowhere near a garden. In fact, one was set in a pub.
And mind your own business, fatty.
Oh! Huh? You know what's wrong with that, of course, don't you?
It's dead.
Yes, but why, John? Why?
It was lonely.
Ah, that grass is starving.
What does grass eat?
Well, if you listen very, very carefully, I think you'll find that it's crying out for some of this lawnsman stuff. Sprinkle a little of that in your lawn, and Robert is indeed your uncle.
Good then, is it?
Good! They use it on the bowling greens in the Gobi Desert.
Pity the shop's shut.
Yes, it's a shame, isn't it?
You think it would fancy a Chinese?
Oh, very good, very good.
Lawnsman. For a beautiful lawn. No trouble.
There's a sort of tentative surrealism about this, although it might be more accurate just to say it doesn't make any damn sense as a thing that could be happening in the real world.
This is... Well, actually, he better tell you because he knows everything.
Not that there's any great need for it to, it's an advert, for Christ's sake. It's just a strange, faintly convoluted way to advertise mulch. At least the one for the bug gun took place in or near a flower shop.
Yeah. What do you reckon this is on my roses?
I don't know, but it's deeply unpleasant.
I noticed that.
Could be a touch of your sooty mold.
Can't be. It's got 10 legs.
Oh. Thrips?
No, thanks. White fly? It's black. Oh, my goodness, I think they're mating.
Yes, well, we can't have that, can we?
Dead, are they, then?
Yes, well, this being a bug gun, I think we can safely say cheerio to their sexual athletics.
Seems like a pity.
Mind you, what a way to go, eh?
Bug gun. Kills bugs. No trouble.
Now, the obvious thing to do when advertising gardening products is to set them in the damn garden. That done, it's time to identify the specific audience you're trying to ensnare. Old people, those retirees who turned to gardening to fill up the yawning gap between work and the grave, were largely covered by the soothing tones of legendary cricket commentator John Arlott, advocating a traditionalist approach to mowing against the rise of the sleek, speedy fly mow.
Qualcast Concord. Even in long grass, it's a lot less bother than a hover.
Well, we covered the mower war last time we broached this ocelot. And besides, fly mow tended to go for the same gentle tea-drinking the English feel, just in a slightly different approach.
Jethro!
Good night, me lady.
The croquet lawn.
First thing tomorrow, me lady.
Now, Jethro. It won't take you long with our new Flymo Sprint Master.
Sprint, me lady.
Well, just go as fast as you can.
There's only one hover that collects its own grass cuttings. The Flymo Sprintmaster. A great finish starts with a Flymo.
Splendid, Jethro. You know, I sometimes wonder what I'd do without you.
You'd probably chip your nail varnish, me lady.
Servants are funny. Attempts were made, mind, to attract a younger and cooler market to lawnmowers. And bear in mind that while it's not necessarily the most masculine of interests or sectors, it is generally men who operate the power tools. Or at the very least, it's generally men to whom power tools are aimed by advertisers. In the late 70s, for example, they hired hot gossip in full Starship Trooper mode and, crucially, costume.
Another first from Flymo. New Flymo DXE, first ever hover mower to cut and collect the grass. Light and easy DXE from the Flymo range. Quite simply, the most advanced lawnmowers in the world.
Doesn't quite break out of its own cognitive dissonance, though. It's not necessarily impossible to make lawnmowers sexy. And not to say sexist, but damn if that doesn't appeal to the old reptile brain. But you can't do it by just dropping a lawnmower into the middle of the latest sexy phenomenon. That just causes a tonal clash.
The most advanced lawnmowers in the world.
So we're still aiming at men here, but appealing to their thirst probably won't work, as the road from the product to the imagery is a little strangulated. The more obvious thing to do is to appeal to their own masculinity. And we saw in the previous episode how Black & Decker were particularly good at that sort of thing, particularly in their mid-80s tough tools for tough jobs phase. Lots of close-ups through wire mesh, industrial percussion, tools you can trust. Trimming the garden hedge or mowing the lawn might be a little more inherently fey than drilling holes in dams, but it's still easy enough to make it seem tough, or at the very least serious. You just need to have the right voiceover. Michael Jaston, for example.
If there's a jungle somewhere at the bottom of your garden, get yourself the new command feed strimmer from Black & Decker. Its extra tough cutting line has more power than any other strimmer. With a unique push-button line feed system for non-stop cutting, yet center balance with finger-touch maneuvering gives you delicate control. Precision to tame every bit of garden. With the new command feed strimmer from Black & Decker.
He wouldn't have worked on those Quellcast adverts quite as well. Quellcast Concord. It's a lot less bother than a hover, for which John Arlott was conversely perfect. And of course Arlott wouldn't have worked quite so well with that pounding Brad Fiedel-esque synthesizer soundtrack, which also underscores the fact that this is serious man work, even though it involves flowers and grass and things.
With the new command feed strimmer from Black & Decker.
That was all part of a brand relaunch, mind. Introducing that orange hexagon box thing, whatever, that was their logo for 30 odd years after that. If you're wondering what their logo is now, save your energy. They did. Anyway, before that, their logo was lowercase and friendly, and their garden-based advertising had a somewhat more whimsical feel to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the new Black & Decker H1 hover mower. Our flight will be at an average height of 1/4 of an inch. We'll be cruising through long grass, flying smoothly over uneven ground, and banking steeply in complete comfort. Our route gives us some fine views of the Black & Decker range. Ahead, the garden clippers are making short work of hedges. Through the trees, the Black & Decker chainsaw, and on your left, the Black & Decker strimmer is making a neat job of awkward edges. We are now landing, and we hope you enjoyed your flight. You'll find conditions outside perfect for Black & Decker gardening. This is garden control from Black & Decker.
Obviously somebody thought about the idea of a hover mower and how it sort of flies around the garden and took it to its logical conclusion, whether it made sense or not. Fair enough. And that was in 1979 odd. A couple of years later, they went even poncier when someone noticed that the biggest and most talked about TV show in the country was Brideshead Revisited, about a big old stately home with big gardens that has fallen into disrepair. As a grasping of the cultural zeitgeist, it was inevitable, even necessary. I'm not sure it sold very many gardening tools, though.
When I returned to Bride's Headache, nature had overwhelmed the garden as well as poor Bennett, the gardener. Luckily, I had equipped myself with garden control from Black & Decker. Bennett quite took to the new electronic hover mower with its easy cutting height adjustment, and he was able to make quite short work of the long walk. Thanks to the Black & Decker lawn edger, Bennett fairly whistled round the edges of the French garden, albeit somewhat tunelessly. Moss and weeds had had a field day on the west terrace. However, the new 20-inch wide lawn raker soon rejuvenated the ancient turf and Bennett. And Bennett found the Black & Decker shredder such an easy way to dispose of bulky garden waste, though I fear the power of it may have gone to his head. Now the old place looks splendid again, thanks to Black & Decker garden control. And thanks too to Bennett, if I ever see him again.
It's kind of the same principle as Flymo using hot gossip, just dropping their product in the middle of something currently popular. Although at least there's less dissonance in this case, and it's certainly better than this goddamn thing from a year or two later, presented without comment.
Get turned on, turn your soil, less work, save the toil. Don't you dig it? Daddy's doing it with a Black & Decker garden worker. Get it ready to sow your seeds. It's a groove to work out weeds. Don't you dig it? Do it round your prize rows. Get down through your veg rows. Don't you dig it? Daddy's doing it with a Black & Decker garden worker.
Don't you dig it?
No wonder they needed to relaunch the brand. So, gardening. You'll notice I concentrated mostly on the machinery and not the more organic stuff like compost. Well, compost isn't advertised much. It just isn't glamorous, or even an especially competitive market. And when it is advertised, it's usually pretty bland and functional, and therefore hard to either snark about or overanalyze, which rather leaves me redundant.
New Miracle Grow Expand and Grow. It's 3 times lighter than ordinary compost and expands to 3 times its size when watered to make 50 litres. It has Miracle Grow plant food mixed in, which feeds for 6 months and grows plants twice as big. New Miracle Grow Expand and Grow. Small bag, big results.
Smiley faces, smilier voiceover, and perhaps the single most obvious musical choice in the entire world, because they can't think of any way around the fact that the product is decomposed waste matter except by turning up the sunniness to blinding levels. Alright, maybe I could think of something to say after all. But I've already said it now, and it only took me 30 seconds. I'm making a 15 to 30 minute show here. In theory. I don't actually know how long the episode's going to be until it's finished. And I've talked myself into a corner and I'm not sure how I'm going to segue into the credits. Yeah. I think I'm just going to have to go with the sudden ending. You've been watching a Bob the Fish production. Thanks! If you haven't found it already, be sure to check out our website at bobthefish.org.uk. Literally hundreds of videos not unlike this one that will make you laugh, think and realise new things or your money back. Which works out great because they're all absolutely free. All of this is possible thanks to the not unique way that Bob the Fish productions are paid for by you, the viewing public, via Patreon. For a donation of as little as £1 a month, not only do you ensure that I still have food and shelter so I can carry on making these programmes, but you could become eligible for a whole host of cool extras. New video essays, special event live streams, all my content a week in advance, and my book on the history of the BBC, Rule the Waves, chapter by chapter as it's written. And some cake, if you go out and buy a cake and eat it while you're watching. And if you don't want to support on a monthly basis, you can make a one-off donation via Coffee. It all helps stave off scurvy. bobthefish.org.uk. You make it what it is.